Okay, hello everybody. So if you have downloaded the attachment for having access to the band assessment master, you will notice that it says view only and a green button over here. You're not going to use the drop down menu there. You're going to come up to where it says file, and you're going to go to make a copy, and you will want to make your own copy. You can take away copy of, whatever you want to name it, and you're going to make a copy of that in your own Google Drive, and then click OK. That is the very first thing that you will need to do. Okay, now that you've made your own copy into your Google Drive, the next thing that I'm going to recommend is that you actually make an additional copy for each class period that you intend on using this for. So if you teach 5 classes of band and you're planning on using it for 5 classes, then I would immediately come and I would make an additional copy. And when I make that additional copy, I might say first period, or whatever you want to title it. But I would at least make a separate copy from your master blank version. That way you always have a master blank version that you have not messed with any formulas or messed with anything else in terms of tabs or how things are lined up. And this is also helpful in case you make a mistake on something and you accidentally delete something. You can always come back into the master that you made a copy of originally, and you can either copy and paste a formula, or you can just start a document over if you needed to. Okay, so hopefully now you've made an additional copy of the master sheet for each of your class periods, or you can just make one copy at a time as you build a particular class period. Now I have this set up with a default of 72 wind players and 6 percussion players. The only reason for that is the largest class I ever had 72 wind players and 6 percussion students. Obviously, if you don't have that many students in one particular class period, you can delete the ones that you don't use. We'll go over that when we get to that point. Okay. My advice though is if you have a class that's larger than 72, the easier thing to maybe do would to maybe make a woodwind and a brass sheet, so you don't have to worry about redoing formulas of things that I've made or connections between particular tabs down on the bottom and the correlating cells that they go to. So just the easier thing to do would be to split that up if you have larger than 72. If you need to add names, you can do that, but I will go over that in a separate video because there will be some copying and pasting involved, and there will be a little bit of formula things that you'll have to redo. The other thing you could do is you could easily delete all of the wind stuff and just have a percussion sheet, and if you had more than 6 percussion, then you could just have multiple sheets for, say, by grade for a percussion section if you have more than 6 in a particular class period. That seems like a complicated thing, but it's actually the easier thing to do unless you're comfortable copying and pasting a lot of the formulas and things that I've created. Alright, so now hopefully you've decided how you are going to break up your classes. I think for most people, the number of students that I have in a given class period is probably going to work out okay. But you've decided how you're going to break up those classes, so now we're ready to dump in student names and emails and instruments. Hopefully you already have that in some other kind of spreadsheet for your classes. If not, I would advise having that probably in a separate document just so you can easily copy and paste that information in. Will just be easier. So I already have a pretend class here of my first period. So I'm going to grab my student names and I'm going to copy those. And I'm going to come back to my first period sheet and go up to the first cell and just paste those in. If you had to adjust the size of your font, anything like that, it's fine. Obviously, if you want the background to stay gray or anything like that, you can mess with your just stats up here to edit those things. Okay, it doesn't really matter for what we're doing right now. So I've got my names, and then for the emails, you can make one of the columns for a student email. You can make another column for a parent email. I tend to use both columns for parents because mom has one email, dad has another, or vice versa. But it's up to you how you want to do that. Okay, so I'm now going to come back and I'm going to pull these two columns of so-called parent emails, and I'm going to come back to that first cell, and there I have them. And again, if you need the borders to be dark, if you care about the aesthetics of how this sheet looks, okay, you can obviously come back when you're done and you can use your borders control and you can put the black border there again. That's totally up to you. Okay, so the emails are there, the names are there, and then I want to make sure I put in their instruments as well because that's going to correlate with the assessment sheets. So I'm going to pull my instrument names, and then I am going to put those here. Now in this case, I have two percussion players, so I am probably going to paste those down into my percussion sheets at the bottom. Okay, and then I can delete them from here. And the reason for that is that the percussion sheet is a slightly different rubric. Okay, and it's there. Now at this point, you're going to want to make a couple decisions. You can leave a few extra sheets in here. All right, so I've got a couple extra sheets and still ones that say Win Student 16. I would advise keeping a few extra sheets in. You never know if there's going to be a schedule change with a kid and they get put into that class period, or if a student moves in or whatever. So I would recommend leaving at least a few blank. Okay, same thing with the percussion. Leave an extra percussion or two if you think that you need it. All right. And then at this point, when you start looking at the sheets that are down here that correlate with these names, you're going to see that those names are now showing up. So there's that student, they play bassoon. The next one over, that student, they play flute. So that is there. Okay. At this point, your next step is if you want to keep these tabs with W-1, W-2, you can remember, oh, that's the first kid here, and this is the second kid here. I typically don't do that, so what you may want to do is literally just copy that cell of that kid and then come down to that tab that correlates to that kid, double click the name, and then you can just paste the name in, and then you've titled the tab to that kid. Okay, that way you can always find that kid's tab and it's there. We do the same thing here. Double click the tab and paste it in. Okay. If you had a class of maybe 40 to 50 kids and you had to do that and copy and paste into all those tabs, it's probably only going to take you a couple minutes to do that, but it is a little bit easier in the long run. And just remember that if you have percussion kids, that you're going to, go to the P-1 or P-2 tabs that are closer towards the end here. Okay. Then what you can do at that point, in this case, I've only got 13, 15 kids, whatever, okay, in here. I can easily select all these and I can delete the rest of these if I want to, okay, up to where the percussion starts. And I would just have to right click and delete all those rows. If you're going to do that, then you're also going to want to delete the extra tabs that you don't need for the actual scales and rubrics, okay? Again, on a class of 40 to 50, it's just going to take you a couple minutes to go through and do that. Okay, but I would advise not having a ton of extra sheets, just a couple in case a kid has a schedule change or something like that. So then you're getting rid of all the extra stuff that you don't really need. Okay, so that'll get you set up with the names, emails, instruments, and lining it up with your tabs. So I took a few minutes and I got rid of the extra blank names that I didn't need, and I went ahead and got rid of the extra tabs. I have attached the names to the tabs like I suggested in the last segment. To do both of those things combined took me on this class about 4 minutes total to do all that, so it wasn't too bad. Okay, so the next thing, which is also optional, is if you are going to use the improvement sheet grid that I have. It's already on the percussion ones, so if you go to one of your percussion students tabs, you will see that there's already a set of recommended improvements that you can check off while they're doing their performance. Since the percussion rubric is different, I already have that one pasted into those. Okay, so those are already there. If you choose to use those for your other instruments, I have a tab down here that says improvement sheets. Okay, and they're in score order, so it starts here with the flute, and then I have oboe, clarinet, all the way in score order. And these are just common things that I say to students. Okay, these are by no means things that you need to use. If you want to reword some of these, you'll want to reword it on this tab of improvement sheets. Okay, however, you'll see that there's some blank spaces in between. Those are there for a reason, so you would want to leave those blank. You would not want to add anything there, okay, because those are spaced out on purpose, which you'll see in a moment. But if you need to reword some of the ones that I have there, you're welcome to do that. But I do have them for each instrument. So if you choose to use these, then we'll go back to our first student, Luke Skywalker. Luke Skywalker is playing bassoon. Okay, and I would be pasting that here if I want to use that. So then I would come back to my improvement sheets. I would scroll down until I see the one for bassoon. And then I'm going to click over here in this corner. Okay, where it says, I'm going to click on that corner and drag all the way down. And I'm going to copy that. And then I will come back to the tab for Mr. Skywalker. And I will click on here where it says paste improvement sheet, and I will paste it. And then you can see there's no spaces now. So the reason for the spaces on the master sheet of those is because I do have hidden rows here, which is where I have all the crazy math equations for doing all the calculations. And so that way you won't see that when you paste them in. Okay. Now, my advice is if you have more than one bassoon player, then you go to all of the students who are actually playing bassoon and paste those in. Same thing if it was a flute player, I would copy that flute sheet and then I would go to all the tabs of all your flute players and put them all in. So that is my recommendation if you're going to use those improvement sheet grids. Okay, so now the next thing is to look at the prescribed email that is here. So if you go to the first one just to do a test, obviously you're not going to send anything, but you would click the link for the email and it will generate that email automatically through whichever app your computer happens to use. It'll usually ask you, if you don't have one set up, what your primary email would be. I'm on a Macintosh computer, so it would bring up my Mac mail automatically. I typically use this on an iPad, and for that, the iPad will ask you what email app you're going to use, if you use a Google app for your email, or if you use your Mac mail through an iPad. And I have it pre-prescribed for my school email address, so it automatically populates from that address for me. Okay, you want to set it up the way you need to. But you want to look at the wording, because if you want to change the wording for the emails, it's down here. For the one for the score, you don't want to mess with these first 4 boxes, okay, because that's going to pull all the information about what everything is on for the assessment and the score they got. The stuff that you want to say after the email is here. And so if you double click that, you can edit if you don't want it worded the way that I have it worded, and you can list whatever you want to, and then it will pull that for each email. It would be the same thing for the absentee, okay? You don't want to mess with the first few boxes, just the very bottom box is what you would click
double click it. If you want to reword it, you can reword that, and then it's there for every email. So you want to just double check that before you move forward. So now you have pretty much everything set up where you can get started. You've got names in, you've got emails in, you've got instruments in. You've retitled the tabs with names. If you're going to use the improvement grid sheets, you've put those in. Okay, you've double checked if you are happy with the wording of the emails. So you have deleted tabs and rows of kids that you don't need for this particular class. So you're pretty much set. So my advice is that you keep this as that class's master, okay? Which means that you're actually not going to put the assessment on this sheet. This is going to be your blank master for that class period. So if you're going to do an assessment, let's say on the concert B flat scale, so then you're going to come to this master sheet, you're going to file, make a copy, and then change your title, whatever you want it to say. And I'm going to say, instead of saying master, I'm going to say B flat scale. Assuming that if that was what you're going to use an assessment on. I'm just using that as an example. Okay, so then I would click OK. Okay, that way, if 2 weeks later you want to do an assessment in your class on the concert E flat scale or a song out of the book or whichever, then you can come back to your sheet that's the master, make another copy for that particular assessment. The reason why this is important is because once you start doing grading, okay, if Luke Skywalker plays the B flat scale and you grade it, okay, and you do that for all your kids, you don't want to have to go back and delete all of the check boxes or any of the improvements or anything like that, because then that's just extra work. So that's why you just copy that master one that you have, okay? So one of the things that I will also say is obviously before you do your assessment, so if we're going to do the B flat scale, this blue box up here, it says type title here, that's where you're going to put the name of your assessment. So if it's going to be the B flat scale, you put it there, whatever it's going to be, okay? And then once that's there, now when you go to generate emails, it will list the title of what that assessment is in the email. In addition, when you go to the students, so if I come over to Bruce Wayne, okay, now it's going to say B flat scale here. All right, so then that is completely set up to do what you need it to do. We're going to talk about the grading portion of this, which is obviously the big it of using this kind of assessment. So you're in class, you're ready to start going down and listening to students. Whether you're listening to them alphabetically or by instrument, you just keep track of the tabs and the kids. So if Moth Gideon, who happens to play flute, okay, and he plays his concert B flat scale, you're going to decide ahead of time if you want to grade just on the quantity skills, so how much of everything is correct, which for scale stuff is typically what I do. Okay, or if you're only going to grade on the quality skills, so those are the fundamentals, okay, of actually physical fundamentals of playing, or if you're going to use both. I would encourage you to probably experiment with a kid or two and see how long it takes you to do one or the other or both together, because it is time sensitive. Okay, so if Moth Gideon plays 2 wrong notes and plays all the rhythms right, forgets to slur something a few times, has a shaky beat, okay, I have it set up to grade this way, okay? So I've put more value of points from top to bottom. So there's more value for note accuracy versus rhythmic accuracy. There's more value of rhythmic accuracy versus articulation, okay? So the rhythmic accuracy would be the actual printed rhythms. The steady pulse would be if they're staying on beat or if it's a little wiggly. Okay, that's just how I have it set. Okay, so it's just kind of scaffolded scoring. Okay, same thing with the quantity skills, and I mentioned this probably in the overview video, but this is based on the Marzano or Danielson model of a scale of 0 out of 4, where the target is actually a 3. So if they get all 3s on everything, they would get 100. Okay, so it's an incentive to do things exceptionally well, which I call kind of professional quality. Okay, which some of that a kid should be easy to do. Okay, so I joke with my students, you may not play like you're in the Chicago Symphony, but you could hold your instrument and you could sit like you're in the Chicago Symphony, and they're going to get more points for that. Okay, so it's an incentive for like extra credit. Okay, so if you don't feel like using that fourth column, again, you don't really need to. Okay, but it is based on 3 as the target for that. All right, so again, it's going to base the score based on what you have in one box or the other, but the moment you click something in both, it's going to start to average them together. So you just need to keep that in mind. And you just want to look out that you don't check 2 boxes within the same row, okay, because that's going to award more points. Okay, so you just want to keep your eye on that. This is especially easy if you're on a tablet or an iPad, because you don't have to use a mouse click or a space bar. You can just use your finger and tap, 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 whatever you want to do. Okay, so that's how that is. And once again, once you put the grades here, okay, there's Moth Gideon. If I go back to my class master and we go to Moth Gideon, you can see that the score is already populated there. Okay, it'll populate all the scores for you there. If you just want to look at all of the scores, it's totally fine. All right, once you're done doing all the grading, you decide if you're going to use any improvements with anything like this. Again, you want to experiment with this. It might feel like it takes too much time for you, or it might be something that you do outside of class and you think back to how that student played. You know, do you want the student to read this, or is this just going to be for your record? That's up to you how you use it. Okay, or you don't use it at all. That's up to you. Okay, but it is there if you are using those improvements there. Now, when you're going to print these, and you go up to File, and we go to Print, okay, by default, it should do it in a landscape format where it's going to be on one page. If it doesn't fit on one page, from Google, all you have to do, where it says custom number here, you just go fit to page, and it'll do that. Okay, and then at the top, if you want to print a current sheet, that's fine. If not, you're going to print everything in the workbook, knowing that some of those sheets you're not going to need. If you have an extra sheet for a kid that's not really there, then you're going to have a blank sheet. It'll also print the self-improvement, the recommended improvement sheets that I have on that tab too. So you will have some excess paper. So the other thing you could do, obviously, as well, is just print it all to a PDF, and then you can decide which pages you want to use. It's probably easier to do that way if you want to eliminate wasted paper. And that's if you're gonna print. Obviously, you don't need to print it if you don't want to, but the option is there.